Hiya, hiya.
Hiya, hiya, hiya.
Got Johnny Madara here today. Johnny is a longtime friend and a first-time caller. He's never been on the show before, any one of my shows, as a matter of fact. And we don't see each other too often because he lives behind the Hearst Castle. He is the zookeeper for William Randolph Hearst's daughter, Patty, who's part of the movement to what was that club she belonged to? The what five?
Symbolist,
Yeah, the Zimbali or whatever it was.
It wasn't good.
No, it wasn't good. Whatever it was, she's not doing that anymore. I'm just joking. But Johnny lives back there, and it's a quiet little spot in Cambria, which is behind the Hearst Castle on the water. And it's very cool because nobody lives there. It's when I had a hard time finding it. And then when I got there, it was beautiful. I mean, there's not a lot of people. So you don't even have to wear a mask when you go out, do you?
Well, we've been wearing them when we go to the farmer's market and you go to any one of the little stores. But you're kind of quarantined automatically here because you're away from everything.
I mean, and
nice.
I mean, I never saw anybody on the street when I was there. No one at all.
No, well, if you don't go to the farmer's market or go into the little town, there's no one here. It's just the animals and the ocean and us.
And you have the forest. You're right next to the forest, right?
The forest is to the left and back of us, and then the ocean's in front. It's nice. I love living here. I really do.
So you miss LA, do you?
Nah.
John used to live under the Hollywood sign in Los Angeles. You always look behind the Hearst Castle, under the Hollywood sign. Are you hiding?
I'm hiding. I'm hiding. It was nice living in LA, and I liked it a lot. But living here, it changed that whole world of running all the time, running in a recording session, doing 12, 14 hours, and coming out of that, grabbing some hours of sleep, and then going back into the studio. And that's all changed. Being up here, it's really nice. I mean, I get up in the morning, I can go outside and breathe that fresh air, and it's nice. It's better than the old days where you were putting in a lot of hours a week. Now I can be creative when I want to be creative. And it's really nice.
Johnny's from Philadelphia. And of course, he has a long history of hit records and recording and production. So we've got to start somewhere with this. So let's start at the beginning. You were born poor. Now, poor. What else happened?
Well, we were so poor, Joey. We couldn't be P-O-O-R. We could only be P-O, Po. We just couldn't get those extra two letters.
I see.
But we lived in the projects, and it was a good education for growing up and learning the real value of life. I had 5 brothers and sisters, and so for me, it was my dad had passed away, and it was moving forward to helping my family to take care of itself.
So did you take a job in a record store?
I actually did. I worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer for about 5 years. And then I had a chance to get a job at, there was 2 DJs in Philly, Joe Grady and Ed Hurst. And they had a record shop called Grady Hurst Record Shop at 15th and Walnut. And I got to work there in part-time, then I got to work there full-time. And then I opened up my own shop in 61. I opened up my own record shop up in 60th and Market Street in the black section of Philly. That was one of the best things I ever did, because I was in the element of music that I loved, and I got to meet artists. I got to meet some young artists who would tell me, "Oh, I sing," because I had the gold record for At the Hop on the wall, and I never thought that was going to be my life, making records. I'd love doing it, but I never thought that would be the thing I'd be doing 20 years from now. So I had the record on the wall. Girls would come in, or guys would come in and say, "Oh, that is a song there up there. Did you have something to do with that?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I wrote that song a few years ago." "Well, I sing. You to hear me sing?" I said, "Sure." I said, "Why don't you come back at 6:30 when I close, and we'll check you out." And a little 13-year-old girl came in by the name of Maureen Gray, and she sang for me, and I went, "Wow." And then I reconnected with David White. Dave was on the road with Danny and the Juniors. And I reconnected with Dave, and Dave came by the record shop. We wrote a song for Maureen, and it went #1 in Philadelphia. And then we started recording a couple of other groups that came in my record shop. And all of a sudden, we had a band that we were working with called Carl and the Commanders. And David and I had been to a record hop, and we watched these kids dancing with their hands up in the air, shaking their hands. And so we asked one of the young people, I said, what's that dance called? And they said, no, it's called The Fly. The Fly. Wow, I like that groove. Went back to the record shop, had David come by, and we finished writing The Fly, got Carl and the Commanders to do the track, and with one of their singers. And he came off great. And so we went up to Cameo Records and played the record for Bernie Lowe, who was the president. And Bernie says, that's a really great record. He said, but we'd like to take your singer off and put Chubby Checker on there. And I said, no, I like our singer a lot. He says, well, he said, if you release that record the way it is, he says, I'm going to cover you anyway. Oh. So it was like, well, what do we do? Bernie Lowe got the track, and we put Chubby Checker's voice on our track. And of course, the record went top 5, and it was a blessing. And it was a blessing. And then after that, we just kept on having hits, which was really nice. The next big hit we had was, we had some groups. We had the Pixies 3. We had a group called The Secrets, and we had 2 big hit records with the girls. And then Lesley Gore did You Don't Own Me, and bam, that went number 1. Went number 1 in one magazine, number 2 in another magazine. I always go with number 1. But that was nice, it was really nice, and I got to be a part of it.
But you started with Dick Clark, right?
Well, Dick was responsible for At the Hop. I mean, if it wasn't for Dick...
Tell us about that. What happened?
Well, what happened was I recorded the original record. It was called Do the Bop. Because David and I said to David, we had to write a song about the kids doing the bop on Bandstand. So we wrote the song, and I was scheduled to have a follow-up record. I'd had one record out called Be My Girl, and I was scheduled to have another record out. So we took David's group, the Juvenaires, and went in and we wrote this song called The Bop, and we recorded it. Same identical record as At the Hop, identical. Instead of singing, let's go to the hop, we were singing, let's all do the bop. So we went and played it for Capitol Records, who I was under contract to, and they didn't like it. They had a guy by the name of Manny Kellum. I remember his name, actually. Wow, that name just came back to me out of the blue. Manny Kellum, and he was their A&R guy, and he didn't like it.
Well, what's A&R? Tell everybody what that is.
That's artists and repertoire.
Well, what is it? What do they do?
They discover the material. As opposed to today, where most songwriters and artists write their own material. Back then, you really did material from other people, and you had a producer who would pick the material and take you into the studio, hire an arranger, and tell you how to sing the song. And I did 2 sides for them after I had to Be My Girl. I did 2 sides for Capitol. But because Capitol didn't like the bop record, we went and played it for Dick Clark. And Dick says, well, the bop is really not happening around the country, he said. Why don't you change it to something about record hops? Like hop. So the title was Dick's title. And so we went back, changed the lyrics around, took Danny out of the background of Dave's group, the Juvenaires. He sang the lead, and bam, one of the biggest records ever. But that was Dick. And I'll tell you, Dick Clark, because Dick's show was a local show. And after we recorded At the Hop, it was about maybe 3 weeks later, Dick's show went network. And when his show went network, bam, he played At the Hop, and it went all across the country and was the first record ever to be number 1 for 7 weeks.
Well, what was the magic of Dick Clark? What was the
magic was that he played the records all across the country. And as you know, Joe, back in those days, you got a record station in Buffalo playing your record, and that was great. But then you'd have to get another station in Cleveland, another station in Detroit. And finally, by the time you spread the record across the country, it was weeks and sometimes even months before we could spread the record. But with Dick Clark, it was instant all across the country. It was American Bandstand. And the show had been called just Bandstand before, but network, Dick changed to American Bandstand. And that was the secret of the show, was that he got to play that music and all the dances. for people all across the country, kids who had never seen those dances ever. But now they were seeing them, and they got excited. And that's why the show was so big.
So I think the kids who were dancing were the stars of the show.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It was Justine and Jerry Blavat.
And Kenny Rossi.
Yeah.
Kenny Rossi.
They became celebrities like MTV Real World.
They were. They were real celebrities.
Yeah.
And Jerry Blavat was the person that organized all the dances. Dick would give him the opportunity to gather the dancers. Okay, you dance with Justine, and you dance with so-and-so, and that was Jerry's job. Jerry did a really good job.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he was the guy that organized all the dances. Now, Jerry had a great personality, and he was perfect for the show. Now he's got his own show for a long time.
Oh my God, he's you never know what's going on with him, because he's
all these years, Jerry has always been really a good guy, always been nice, always kind, always treats me very special. And in life, we only can go by the people that we come in contact with and how they treat you. And I've been really honored to have a friendship with you all these years, and with some of the other DJs that I've worked with through the years.
But you don't like any of them as much as me.
And I love you.
Yeah, I
like you.
You like me better than Jerry Blavat, because I'm going to tell him.
No, I've never been closer to anyone from the DJ area in my life than you, and you're my friend.
Yeah,
you're a friend. You're not just a DJ. You're a friend. So that's more important than anything.
Well, that's true, John. That's true. So now we have at the bop. Let's do the bop at the hop. And then we got that out of the way. We get Lesley Gore, and then we have a record store in the black section of Philadelphia, and the black people who were recording had a hard time getting play on the white stations.
Oh, definitely. There was always a white version of a popular black song.
Yeah,
and I happened to watch. I watched the movie the other night on YouTube. It's on YouTube actually. Little Richard's movie is on YouTube, and I watched it, and it was really good. I mean, it was really, really good to go back into that era. And it wasn't Happy Days. It wasn't American Graffiti. It was the reality of the era, how hard it was, especially for black artists. It was really hard for black artists. And what black artists have happened to them, and as Little Richard pointed out in the movie, was that the white guys would come along and cover it. And they do a clever thing in the movie. They do Little Richard singing a wop ba ba loo ba ba la bam boom, and then they go to Pat Boone. Then they flash the white character doing the same thing, and then they flash back to Little Richard. Then they flash back to the white guy. So you hear the white guy deliver him, "Tutti frutti, oh Rudy," and Little Richard, "Tutti frutti, oh Rudy." Oh man, that was
Pat Boone. That was Pat Boone that did that.
Oh, I know. And I remember having the record shop. That my record shop, I only carried, like with Ain't That a Shame, I only carried Fats Domino. Yeah. I didn't have Pat Boone. And if you wanted Pat Boone, you had to go to a white record shop. But my record shop, we had all the black versions.
And there was a war between Pat Boone and Elvis.
Oh, yeah.
It was very clean cut. That was the Ivy Leaguers. And other
Elvis was the
Greasers.
Rock.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Richard talks about that. He talks about, I saw several interviews since he's passed away. I've watched some interviews. And he talks about his relationship with Elvis. They had a really nice relationship. He had deep respect for Elvis. But he didn't have deep respect for Pat Boone. He didn't like it.
Wait, there was another difference. Pat Boone was on the West Coast. Yeah. And there was an East Coast, West Coast separation too. The West Coast didn't have the timber that we all had in the East Coast cities.
Well, Richard would say, "Man," he says, "how can they do wop bop baloo bop blah bam boom? I'm the only one that can do wop bop baloo bop blah bam boom." He said, "What we got to sing the songs faster, so he can't get those words out." So he says, "Well, here's what we're going to do. Well, long toe salad, she's built for speech. You got every little thing that up John needs. Oh baby, oh baby." He said he ain't gonna be able to do that. Richard was great. Actually, I saw Richard.
And wait a minute. Now, Richard also was not able to do Speedy Gonzales,
No, no.
which was a novelty record of Pat Boone's.
I'll tell you something. Out of all the artists that I've had a pleasure to meet in my life, he was one of the best. He was a really nice man. I really liked Richard. I saw him in an elevator, maybe 4 years ago. I got in an elevator, and there was Richard. And he looked at me. I looked at him. He went, John? And I said, Richard. I said, man, you look great. And he went, I look cool. I look very cool. I'm pretty. He was a good guy, Richard. Always knew where he was coming from.
You know, at the induction for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, for me, he was there. And I put on some extra lipstick on the top where his mustache. And he said, you jive, get that thing out of there. Shut up.
Well, there was a guy by the name of Billy Ray who had found Little Richard back in the early days. And Billy Ray used to wear a heavy pancake. And he said to Little Richard, he said, that's the secret, looking pretty. He said, looking good on stage. He said, you got to lay that pancake on there. He said, you got a pancake on there, everybody's going to love you. And Little Richard started wearing the pancake. And then he said, I can't go out without the pancake on. He says, I look pretty with the pancake. I tell you, he was an amazing talent. I mean, the records he made were groundbreaking records.
You brought that up, but there was another guy, because we're in a circus business, you know, and art imitates life. And the other guy that came up like that was Screamin' Jay Hawkins.
Oh,
I'll cast a spell on you. And he had the complete, he was what's his name? Pat Cooper. Who am I thinking of?
Pat Cooper?
No, Pat Cooper was not an artist. That's my friend. But Alice Cooper.
Oh, Alice Cooper. Okay. Yeah, sure.
He dressed like that in the 50s, what Alice did in the 70s, you know. But it's a circus. It's great. It's great, huh?
No, Screamin' Jay Hawkins was one of the acts that was on all those early shows.
Yeah.
Very first time I went to see James Brown was at the Uptown Theater in Philly. I guess I was about 16, and Screamin' Jay Hawkins was on that same show.
And Ruth Brown.
Well, Ruth Brown. I don't know if she was on that one, but yeah, I remember seeing Ruth Brown live. She was fantastic. Oh my! Those early days of rock and roll, they were the very best. Prior to 57, 55, and 56, for me as a young person, there was no music like that music. That was the best.
But then you wrote and produced what? Went into another era.
Well, after You Don't Own Me, we were having a lot of hits, especially with girl groups. And there was an artist who was singing with the Dovells by the name of Len Barry. Yeah. And Cameo Records was actually right across the street from our office. We were at 250 South Broad. They were at 309 South Broad. And Lenny was over there doing the Dovells one day, and his contract was coming up for renewal. And he just said, I can't sing this jive stuff anymore. That guy started singing some real music. So we were all friends. Lenny and I were real good friends because Lenny used to hang out the record shop. The Dovells used to hang out the record shop with Jerry Gross, Arnie Silver. But Lenny came over to the office one day and he says, I'm leaving Cameo. And he says, I want to record with you guys, which was a thrill because and we had no point of reference because Lenny had always done the Dovell kind of things. So when we wanted to record Lenny, we thought, well, where can we put him that makes him, with his great voice, truly unique? And we tried in the beginning to do a kind of a remake of You Can't Sit Down. We got permission to change the lyrics, and we called Do It Again. And so it was the same version, as basically the same thing as You Can't Sit Down, except it was, let's do it again. And it made some noise because it was Lenny by himself, not with the Dovells. But then we had an idea to write another song. I had an idea to write a song called 1, 2, 3. It was 1, 2, and 3. And I brought it in one day for a writing session with Lenny, and Len says, let's change it to 1, 2, 3. And we wrote the song one day, and we were in the studio within 2 weeks, and bam, that was like the session came off so fine. Jimmy Wisner was a great arranger. We had the times. and the Sweet Three, 2 background groups singing backgrounds, Bell Sound Studios, New York. Oh, wow. We walked out of the session knowing that we had a hit with 1, 2, 3 because it sounded so good. And, I was good friends with George Harrison. And George, whenever I'd see George, he'd always say to me, John, he says, John Lennon just loves the drum sound on 1, 2, 3. He says, he asks me all the time, he says, I'd love to get that drum sound on one, like we got on 1, 2, 3. He says, that's such a great drum sound. So I had to tell George how we got the drum sound. And I don't know if he ever used it, but I did hear a few records after we had that talk that had that kind of drum sound.
Well, how'd you do it?
Well, every session I would always go in earlier before the session and walk around the studio with the engineer and look at the mic setups, because I was really into mixing and into the sound area of making records. So I know that we were going to use a couple acoustic guitars on that session, which are open mics, and of course the drums, which are open mics. And I had 2 drummers, so I had 2 sets of open mics, and I had the guitars. Then I had 2 keyboards, a real acoustic piano and an electric piano. So of course the acoustic again is open mic. So what I did was I hung a microphone at the back of the studio up in the high as the ceiling. Not quite to the ceiling, but as high as I can get the microphone up there. Because I wanted to record the room, just the room, the overtones of the room. And we did that. I recorded the overtones and I recorded on a separate track, just the room itself, the sounds coming out of the room.
Love it.
So when I went to do my mix, the drums now had a unique sound because they're spilling into all the microphones. And of course the keyboards are spilling into the microphones. So you're getting acoustics that are truly unique because they're overtones that are happening in the room. So when I went to mix, I had the regular drums, and I did my mix on the regular drums, and then I brought up the fader on the room sound. Oh, that really added to the depth of the regular drums and then the overtones that were in the room. And that's how I did it. And
I can imagine George Harrison hanging. I can imagine him hanging in a microphone from the ceiling of Abbey Road, trying to saying, "Oh, God, I got a great idea," and George Martin looking at him saying, "What the hell are you talking about? We got the most expensive equipment in the world. Get out of here."
We were in Abbey. Joe Tarsia from Sigma Sound.
Yeah,
and Joe and I went to England with our wives back in the latter 60s. And I had been in EMI several times. I had worked in EMI. And so he wanted a tour of the studio. So I called somebody I knew, and we got a tour of the studio for Joe. So we're walking around, and who's in Studio 2 but Paul McCartney doing an overdub on Maxwell's Silver Hammer and George Martin. And that's the only 2 that were in there, no other Beatles. But Studio 2 at EMI is on the 2nd floor. And the actual recording studio is on the 1st floor.
right.
So you look down into the studio. So we're getting the tour, and the engineer now brings us into the Studio 2 recording studio downstairs. And we're looking up, and we can see McCartney and George Martin in the studio. But I'm looking at Ringo's drums. And there's 9 microphones on the drums. I'm like, 9 microphones on the drums? Wow. I took a picture. And there was George's guitar set up, and all the instruments were all set up. And I'm looking at the kick drum on the Ringo's drums, and the skin was off the front of the kick drum, and they had a pillow stuffed in it. And I'd never seen that before. I said, whoa, I like that. That's a good idea. So we went back upstairs, and McCartney comes out, going to the loo. And the engineer says, "Oh, Paul, I'd like you to meet a couple of guys here." He says, "This is Joe Tarsia from Sigma Sound Studios in Philadelphia. And this is John Madara, who wrote this song, the songs I had written." And we start talking. And Joe Tarsia is a funny guy. Joe always had a thing of, he'd always say something to little aggravation. Bring aggravation into the conversation. A little
very Philly, very South Philly.
Very South Philly. Yeah. So he says to Paul, he says,
do you know the best thing to come out of South Philly?
What's that?
The northbound train. That's something like he would say. Go ahead. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, no. Anyway, what happened was that Joe says to Paul, because we'd had a record out as the Spokesman. We had the Dawn of Correction, which was, a pretty big hit. So our second record was Michelle. We did a cover of Michelle from the Beatles album. So Joe says to Paul, he says, he says, John, their group, the Spokesman, did a cover of Michelle, and it's selling really well in Philadelphia. Well, Paul evidently didn't like that.
No.
Because no, he his whole smile demeanor changed, and he looked back at Joe and me, and he says, well, ours is doing quite well also. Bye. So about 10 minutes later, the engineer comes up to us and he says, hey, listen, guys, you can't go back in the studio anymore. He says, George Martin asked if you guys would not go back in the studio anymore, not look around.
Yeah.
But that was my only meeting of Paul. But I must tell you, George was really special. And Ringo, loved Ringo.
Well, Ringo's my same birth date, and his secretary worked for me when I was at 20th Century Fox.
Wait.
My secretary was his girlfriend. I got this wrong. I'm sorry. His living at the time. I like him a lot. I liked him a lot. I thought he was
special.
Very,
real.
Very interesting, real guy. Yeah.
Yeah, real. He
but
was real.
You got out of the white crowd with all those guys, except for David White. And so what you did was now you get into the black crowd. Now you got Gamble and Huff and what did you do for that season just before you got to Hall Oates? What happened in between there?
Well, what happened was my record shop was on 60th Street right off of Market, 5 South. So it was the subway elevator train was right there, and then you crossed over Market Street, and then you were in the North 60th Street. Well, North 60th Street had a nightclub, and it was a black nightclub. So after I closed the record shop, I would go there maybe once a week and just hang out. So I went one night, and there was a band on stage, the Lavenders, and this piano player playing piano was Leon Huff. And I thought, wow, never heard a piano player like that. He was the best piano player I ever heard in my life. He was incredible, and the group was incredible. So after the set was done, I went up to Leon, and I said, Leon, nice to meet you. I said, why don't you come on down to our office on Broad Street, and I'd like to talk to you. So Leon came down, and I signed him to a writing production deal. Well, Leon he was amazing to sit down and write with Leon. His foot was a drum. He would keep the tempo with his foot, and it was like a drum, and play piano and could write songs. Now, what happened is that we did quite a few records together, and he wrote a lot of good songs with us. And Kenny Gamble, who was up on the 6th floor, we were on the 2nd floor of the Schubert building, was working with a guy by the name of Jerry Ross. And one day they met in the elevator. Hey, you write songs? I write songs. Let's get together. Well, they did get together. Probably the biggest writing team, I think, maybe ever. 30 number one records. 30 number one records. And it was great. It was a good relationship. I got involved in a lot of the records they made. I got involved in Expressway and Cowboys to Girls and Only the Strong Survive, Western Union Man. I got to get involved with because I was involved with Leon. And but before Leon went with Kenny full time, we did a record with Bunny Sigler, Let the Good Times Roll, which was a big record. And then Leon, and then that's when David and I broke up. I said 67. David and I broke up, and David wasn't involved in Let the Good Times Roll. We were still partners at that time, but he wasn't involved in that. And then Leon and I did the rest of the album with Bunny Sigler. But those early Bunny Sigler records that we did, David and I did with Len Barry, are gigantic Northern soul hits. So yeah, Bunny was a great artist to work with, and we were just kept on working with new artists. And having, sometimes mediocre hits and sometimes having a big hit. But that was a great era because it was.
How did you get Gamble and Huff?
Well, only because I had Leon signed. Leon was signed to me, and then when Kenny was up on, like I said, on the 6th floor, they would start hanging out in my office, and I'm on the 2nd floor and be writing. And then Tom Bell, who was also involved with Kenny and Leon in that beginning era, would stop in the office all the time after he came out of Sigma Sound. "Hey, Johnny, I got this new track I just did with the Stylistics. You got to hear this track." And he played me "Bet You by Golly Wow," and he sang me the song. And I said, "Oh, Tommy, great, great song." I got to be good friends with Tommy because Tommy didn't drive. And he lived not about 20 minutes from where I lived. And we both had the same hobby, fish tanks. So he had a big fish tank. I had a big fish tank. So on Sundays, I'd pick him up and we'd scoot out to Martin's Aquarium. And on Martin's Aquarium, we would go out and pick our fish. I'll take 2 of those, 1 of those. And yeah, so Tommy and I got to be good friends. So I got to be really close with the whole Gamble Huff people. Kenny, brilliant, just brilliant. And Leon was a perfect combination for the 2 of them to be together. Just perfect.
And a lot of hits came out of Philadelphia with those guys and with you. And there was Cameo Parkway, there was Swan Records, there was the American Bandstand. It was a centerpiece for the music, for the marriage of disc jockeys with the radio stations, with television too.
Yeah.
Now, when you got, how did you do with Hall Oates? How did that come about? That seemed different.
Well, that was after David left, and Leon was still there, and Tom Sellers, who was a terrific young arranger, I had used on some sessions, and just brilliant arranger. And so Tommy came in, and I signed Tommy to the company because I wanted somebody like that around that could be the person in between writing the songs and going into the studio, the arranger, the person who could put all those ideas together. And Tommy was 21 years old, 22 years old. So Tommy had friends like John Oates and Tim Moore and Jim Helmer and Daryl. So Daryl actually came over from Sigma one day. Joe Tarsia sent Daryl over to me to listen to him sing. He says, "I got to listen to this guy sing. He sings great." So Daryl played for me, and I said, "Whoa, the guy sings great." And so kind of with Daryl there and Tom Sellers, and then Tim Moore formed a band called Gulliver. And I recorded an album with them, and it was a terrific album. Daryl singing lead, Tim singing lead, harmonies. But what happened there, Joey, was that Chancellor Records was like the early one of the companies. They were the early companies. Then Cameo. So you had Chancellor, Cameo, Swan. They were the 3 main record companies in Philadelphia. This was before David and I. So, and before Gamble and Huff. So what happened was, as Cameo started to go down, and of course Swan went down, and of course Chancellor went out of business. So we were like the new guys on the block. And so I always kind of think that our contributions kept the Philly sound going. And then with Kenny and Leon, that became the new Philly sound.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I did Daryl as Gulliver, then I did Daryl as a solo artist also. And then Daryl met John in our office, and I started recording John and Daryl, and that became, again, another part of the Philly sound. So the Philly sound continued from the Cameo, Chancellor, Swan into our era, and then that era started the Gamble Huff.
Then you moved to L.A.
Then I moved to L.A.
And you had another,
which was a good move. That was a good move.
You get all the big artists now, all the ones who are already established, and they're all coming.
I got to work with a lot of.
Yeah, because you had a track record, so now they put you in cartoons, right? You were doing cartoon music.
I did the Ralph Bakshi, Hey Good Looking. I did Denny Darty from the Mamas and the Papas when they broke up, with Mama Cass and Michelle Phillips. That would never happen in Philadelphia. That never would have happened in Philadelphia. And I did Wayne Newton. You were involved with the Wayne Newton things too. Yeah. I did a lot of artists that I never would have had a chance to do in Philadelphia. And I got a chance to work with John Williams. So, yeah, Russ Regan from 20th Century Records, who you knew very well and were a part of making 20th Century very successful. Russ called me up one day and he says, "Hey, John, you got to go down to Western Recorders. I got a soundtrack going on there," he said, "and I got this guy, this composer, he's doing this movie for us. He said, you got to go down there and get and put a soundtrack together for me for the album, man. I need an album. You remember Russ, how he was? And I said, okay. I said, what's the guy's name? He says, his name is, oh yeah, John Williams. John Williams.
Who didn't know him?
No, I didn't know he was then, but boy, he was going to become the great composer of films. So I went down to Western Recorders and I did the Cinderella Liberty, which was a movie he had just finished for 20th. And I put the soundtrack album together. But those are opportunities I never would have had.
I think you also, did you have something to do with Quincy Jones in the back of my head?
Well, Quincy, was the producer of You Don't Own Me.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
And David and I met Quincy in Chicago.
Right.
When David and I got a call from Mercury Records to come up to Chicago, they wanted the Philly sound. And they knew that we were giving it the Philly sound to Philly. And so they called us up and sent us tickets to come up to Chicago. And we walk into this big room, conference room, and there's Shelby Singleton, Irving Green, Quincy Jones, and about 3 other producers from Nashville. And so it was very intimidating. Irving Green was a big Gigundo guy.
They were very, very wealthy. Mercury Records was a big international company.
Oh yeah,
So
I remember the. Good, Joe.
You probably hung a mic from the ceiling. No, you didn't do that.
But I got to tell you something. It was very nervous walking into that meeting, and we were just kids. I mean, we were in our mid-20s, and we walk into this room, and there's all these big people, and we sat down, and Irving Green was a very big, loud guy with a big voice. All right, kids, what do you got? Well, we have some new masters we just recorded, so play those. So we play them. It's pretty good. And Quincy was very, very wonderful. He was a beautiful man, very, very warm, very kind. He said, "Yeah, it's good stuff, kids. That's good stuff." I said, "What do you got new?" So we said, "We just finished writing a new song." He says, "Go over to the piano and play it for us." It's Quincy. So we played him "You Don't Own Me." Well, Quincy fell down. He said, "Wow." He said, "I'm doing an album with Lesley Gore." He said, "You got to go play that for Lesley Gore." And he says, "She's working up at Grossinger's this weekend." He says, you got to go up there and pray for her. So he calls her on the phone, sets it all up. And David and I get in the car, drive to Grossinger's, and we find her by the pool. Well, David and I always wrote a lot of our songs with a baritone ukulele, which is surprising. We wrote a lot of our songs with baritone ukulele because it's very mobile. You can move it around. You couldn't take the piano with you. So we play her "You Don't Own Me" by the pool with the baritone ukulele, and she loves it. So she says to us, "I'd love to hear that with piano." So we go into the main building, we find a piano, and we play her for her, and she fell down. Yeah. And so she called Quincy, and Quincy says to us, "Go up, and I want you guys to go to New York next week and meet with Klaus Ogerman." Klaus Ogerman did all the arrangements on "It's My Party," "Judy's Turn to Cry," and great arranger. And so we went up to New York, and we dictated the arrangement to him. So Quincy says, "Loved what the idea you did with Klaus." He said, "Show up at the session Wednesday night, A&R Studios, be there." So Dave and I show up at the studio. We're about 15 minutes late getting there, driving from Philly to New York. And they're doing "You Don't Own Me." So we walk into the studio, and there's "You Don't Own Me." Joe, you got a bird on your head. Anyway, he's doing "You Don't Own Me." And when the take was done, he says to David and I, "Is it the way you want it to be?" And this is Quincy Jones. Pretty hard to tell Quincy Jones to make a correction. Yeah. But I said, well, Quincy, I said, in the beginning, I said, we had a little piano thing in the beginning. I said, it's not there. And then there was a couple other little things. "Klaus, stop everything. John and Dave are coming out." Well, he used to call me Nervous Norvis, Quincy. I was Nervous Norvis, and Dave, who said 2 words an hour, was Gabby. So Dave didn't talk very much. So he says, "Yeah, Gabby and Norvis are coming out." He says, let them do what they want to do." So we did. We put the introduction on to the piano, which was a ba-ba-bum, bum, bum. That wasn't there. So we put that on there, and then made a couple of changes with the vocal, and added an extra modulation. in the ending. Added one more modulation, and then we went back in the studio. Quincy said, "You happy?" I said, "Yeah, we're happy." Then did another take, and it came out great.
This became the female national anthem this generation right now.
It's been in 12 motion pictures, that song.
And you got a Grammy. You got a Grammy.
A Grammy for that, 12 motion pictures. My songs, which I just found out, have been in 80 motion pictures.
Well, now let's talk about that. You're going to do a film at the Hop, which is it's the story, the history of rock and roll, done with the young people of today playing those parts, like the dancers on American Bandstand and all of the people who are in your record store. And the story, it's not necessarily your story of your life, but it's a story about what you created in your life.
It's the story of the era. You know, I've seen so many films about the era, but no one's ever really painted that true picture of the era. You know, I've seen the movies that have kind of a tongue-in-cheek look at the era, you know, but it's not that reality, the reality that kind of a Martin Scorsese gets in his films. He gets that reality. That's what At the Hop's going to be, that reality of the street, how it really was, how tough it was, and that transition from the Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, Don Cornell, Vic Damone,
Patty Page.
Don't forget Patty Page. Georgia Gibbs. I mean, there was a transition. In fact, Georgia Gibbs was doing, like Little Richard said, she was doing the white versions of.
But she had a white person steal from a white person.
What was it now? She did, was it Dance With Me, Henry?
Yeah.
Was that the one she did?
She did that, and
she did a remake of one of the other ones. She changed the word. I think she changed the words. Was it Dance With? Yeah, because the original lyric was very suggestive, very sexual suggestive, and then she cleaned it up, and that's what the artists were doing. But there was no Elvis Presley.
You know, I want to tell you something. This is a vulgar society. They had no idea that "Open the Door, Richard" was about getting sex. That's what it meant. It was "Open the Door, Richard" meant to.
Well, it's like Richard says. Richard says, "Long, tall Sally, she's built for speed. She's got every little thing that Uncle John needs. A wop bop a loo bop," and he said, "Wop bop a loo bop a lop pantoum." Now, what's the word, Joey, they use for a woman? There's a word with a P.
Don't get me on that.
Yeah, but he said they didn't like my words. He said, so they had to bring in this woman who cleaned up all my lyrics. So they brought this woman in, and she would clean it up from Tutti Frutti, get some booty. That's it. Tutti Frutti, get some booty. and so she cleaned up Tutti Frutti, oh Rudy, as opposed to Tutti Frutti, get some booty. Yeah. So that was, and so when that happened, the white stations were not playing a lot of those records. So you had the white version of those records. But that was not the last, because the black versions were the powerful versions. They were the ones that were the new. The beat was different. The performances were dramatically different. And it stuck. And that became the new music.
So are you going to put that in the film? You're going to show the evolution of it?
We're going to show the whole evolution of how the music changed. And there was a kind of a competition between black and white. There was a competition, though it wasn't like a competition of where you said, I gotta beat the white version, or no, it was a competition of just carrying the music further and introducing it to another audience. And the performances were based upon who was singing it. So if somebody felt the song one way and somebody felt the song another way, that's how it was performed. And today, even more than ever, that is the case. You get somebody who sings one of the old rock and roll songs, and even though it's a white guy, like Billy Joel will sing one of Richard's songs, and man, he'll do it as good as Richard does it, because it's become a part of how people perform. They learn from the days before. You learn from what came before, and then you incorporate it into your performances. And that changed.
Bruce Springsteen did that too. Bruce
yes.
did that.
Oh, absolutely. Bruce was. I think it influenced a lot of the singers.
It influenced all of us, and I mean, even the radio people influenced me. I mean, we all come from a senior position. How many
DJs imitate? Who was the big DJ out of New York?
Alan Freed at the beginning, and then Murray the K, and then
Black DJ.
Oh, you mean Georgie J? Well, he was out of Philly.
No, who was the other
There
one?
were a lot of them
No, no,
out of New
the
York.
biggest one. The biggest one, Joey, came out of New York.
I thought I was.
I'm doing Black.
Oh.
Black DJ. He had the clock on the wall. He did the whole, all the sayings. He had all the sayings.
Oh, at 305 is Dr. Jive. Dr. Jive.
Who was that? He was giant DJ.
Oh, you're talking about Frankie Crocker? He
Nope.
came later.
Bigger than Frankie Crocker. He was the #1 black DJ.
Oh, there's so many. Fat Jack Walker. I mean, they're all really good guys. They were good jocks. Chuck Leonard was more white guy. You know, he was white sounding. But for the black jocks, it was oh my God.
He was the biggest, the #1 guy. I can't think of his name. I'm sorry. That's what happens when you get older. That those little memories go bye-byes.
Well, we're farther away from the truth, also.
The truth.
That's what you get.
For sure.
All right, so now we're going to put a movie together. It's called At the Hop,
Uh-huh.
and it's going to star some young people and old people together. You're going to mix it up, or what? What are you going to do with it?
Well, we have the adult family. We have the adult family, and the father who his life has not been good. The father who's never really made it in life. He struggled from one job to the next, and Bobby, his son, is a part of the new generation. He's listening to all the new music and being heavily influenced by the black performances. So Bobby, he had his little radio upstairs in his bedroom, which he listened to black radio. And downstairs, out of the Petrilli, his father, the Petrilli family, and mom, was coming Frank Sinatra, Vic Damone, and a lot of the early records like Les Paul and Mary Ford.
Yeah.
So Bobby had his own music upstairs, and his parents had his music downstairs. But Bobby is heavily influenced by the black music. So Bobby hangs out with a bunch of guys, and one of his best friends, Sonny, has a vocal group. And Bobby loves Sonny, and they get along great. In fact, Bobby dates Sonny's sister, Mary. And so in the evening, a lot of the guys, we used to do this. I don't know if you ever did this, Joey. We used to jump roofs. You go from one roof to the next roof. And the main reason we used to do it was to get the half balls that we hit up on the roof when we played stickball. We play stickball, the roof would go up on the ball on the roof. So at night, we used to go up on the roof, grab the stickballs, and jump from one roof to the next to the next. So Sonny, they're all out there, Sonny and Billy, and who is the lead singer for Sonny's group. And they're jumping roofs, and Billy falls, and he gets killed. And so they're at an afternoon after the funeral, little luncheon, and someone suggests that Bobby, who has been taking classical music lessons, because his dad thinks he has a great voice, and he does, and he wants him to be the next Mario Lanza. So he's got him enrolled in the Philadelphia Conservatory for opera, and so he says, "Hey Bobby, why don't you sing one of your little arias for honor for Billy?" So Bobby starts singing little aria, but he stops. He says, "You know what? Now, Billy would have liked that. Billy would have liked me singing a song that he would have performed." So he starts singing "Pledging My Love." Well, nobody's ever heard Bobby sing a rock and roll song, and now everybody goes, "Whoa!" And Sonny, who says, "I just lost my lead singer. Wow, this could be my new lead singer." So that's how it starts, with the relationship between Bobby and Sonny now become one of. Sonny says, "Man, we'd love you to come in, hang out with us, and try singing some lead vocals with us." And that starts our story.
Is this a true story? Is it true?
This is, well, I would say that it's true with a lot of people who were in that early days of rock and roll.
Yeah, but you're not basing it on any particular person.
No, not really.
Just an era.
Just that I know in my life that people I've met went through that. People who had those similar experiences. Not knowing what you're going to do with your life, and you have a really good voice. And I know I was a singer my whole life, my early part of my life, and I love singing. But that led into the writing and producing, and still wanting to keep on singing.
This should actually be a series.
Oh, a series.
Yeah.
First of all, there's never been anything like this. there's never been a true movie about rock and roll.
Will you put all this real music in there?
Well, we've got 15 classic oldies. Plus,
yeah, I mean they're real. They're not made up songs for the, like at the hot. I mean the Hairspray is all made up songs.
No, we wrote three brand new songs that Bobby and the group will perform. But the rest of the songs in the movie are 15 golden classics.
Yeah.
I mean, oldies that are just the true rock and roll classics.
Will there be a Dick Clark in there too?
Will be a character like a Dick Clark. Yeah, there'll be a character like a Dick Clark.
A television.
But he won't be Dick. He's got a fictitious name, but he'll be a character like Dick. And I wanted to.
Since he changed the name at the Bop to at the Hop, you got to change it from Dick Clark to Lick Dark. I mean,
actually, Joey, I actually have a video.
Turnabout's fair play.
Yes, it is. Well, I actually have a video of Dick talking about that, and Dick actually saying, "Well, these guys came in with a record called Do the Bop," and I told them that Do the Bop was kind of going out of.
It was passe. It was over the hill.
And I said to them, Dick says this, and I said to them, write something about the hops, like at the hop. And that's my one main contribution to rock and roll history.
So what are you going to do? You're going to have John Williams do the music?
Oh, no. I want to use, there's a great arranger who had an Academy Award for the Buddy Holly story, Joe Renzetti out of Philadelphia, who did a lot of the Gamble Huff records and did a lot of our records too. A great arranger. I'm going to bring him into the score. We've talked to Michael Imperioli about playing the father role. He'd be great. I'd love to have a Stevie Van Zandt play the owner of the Black Record Shop in Philly. And for the grandmom role, there's a grandmom role who lives in the Petrilli household, is Olympia Dukakis, also an Academy Award winner. And she lives in Jersey. So she'd be a great person to bring over to play the grandmom role. And have some good young kids. So now we want to make our movie.
There's young people in the movie, though. This is all young people are going to.
All about it's about young people. This is about young people. This is not about old people.
It's about when we were 18, 19 years old.
That's what it's about. It's about that era, and it shows the love and caring that our family had for us, and how much it meant for us to be that we would be successful at something in life.
Yeah.
And our fathers.
My idea of success was to be able to be on the blanket on the beach with Annette Funicello.
That would have been good.
Yes. Or Connie Francis did Where the Boys Are, but you have to have separation now, so it doesn't quite work. But you're going to do this film when everybody's allowed to hug and touch each other again this year after we get this virus solved.
And I think that for me, I look at this and I say the audience for this movie is the world.
Yeah.
Because all over the world, rock and roll is still gigantic. And I look at the population, and I said 1/3 of our population in the world grew up with this music. They grew up with this music. This is their music. But yet the young kids love the old rock and roll.
Well, do you know how many parents hate you for poisoning the kids? Do you realize that 1/3 of the world's parents want you to go away?
Get lost already. Go back to the hop.
So what are we going to do at the hop? We got to get someone to come up with this great production company like MGM or Columbia. Those guys are all splitting with each other. Who do you think would be a good studio? Just pick one out. Who would be a good studio for it of the major ones?
Well, certainly of the major studios, Fox would be great because they have Disney, and Disney owns Fox. So it's a great outlet for exposure. But the truth is that in today's world, streaming has become state of the art. That's the way people view movies today. And when I look at streaming and I look at all the different streaming outlets, I look for something on there that's different out of the box. And every once in a while you catch a good movie, but there's nothing there about the 50s. There's nothing there about that.
But every once in a while you catch a good conversation about that on the streaming. I think this would be one of them.
Well, the truth is that 1/3 of our population are seniors, and that's a biggie. It's a big audience, and I really truly believe that the home audience is going to be bigger than ever because the virus has started this, and I think that people aren't going to go back to the movie theaters as in the audience that they had previously, I think they're going to lose a giant part of that audience. Because people have discovered they can sit at home on their big screen TV with surround sound and be just as entertained as going to the movie theater.
Now, do you
So,
have a website for At the Hop? Is there a site, or do we just go to Johnny Madara?
yeah, go to John Madara or That Philly Sound, which is my website. But I think that to do this as an independent film, as opposed to doing it through the studios, is the way to go, as opposed to having the big studios sitting on your shoulders, watching what you're doing. I found that in the music business, if it wasn't for the independent record producer, we'd still be listening to records that were made back in the early 50s. The independent record producer and the curiosity of artists of exploring new ways to sing songs and the influence of Black radio and Black performances changed our music. And that's never been produced as a film, never. No one's ever done it. Every movie that's ever come out about that era is always about the business, about payola, about how many points you're getting, but it's never been about the reality of just kids, their simplicity of a kid's life, and how they related with their families and how their families related with them.
So let me see if I got this right. This is going to, in this movie, there will not be a cop shooting a black kid.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that, Joey.
There's not going to be a cop shooting a black kid in this film.
No way.
We got to get away from all of that.
This is smiles. This is happiness.
Good.
Love. This is wonderfulness. This is something that we really need in films, especially now. We really need this in films. We need to show that side of our world, that side of love and kindness. And all I could say is my experiences in the music business were great. The people I met and the people that influenced my career, it was fabulous. I mean, you talk about Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones, genius. I mean, how much of a genius is Quincy Jones that in 1964 he produced "You Don't Own Me," but in 2000,
do you know that I was good friends with him? You didn't know that. Well, you didn't know that we were close.
No, I didn't know that, but I got to tell you that a genius he is. That in 2016, what does he do? He makes another gigantic hit record with "You Don't Own Me." Yes. Produces Grace and G-Eazy, making it a rap singing record, and the record goes #1 all over the world, and produced by Quincy Jones. God bless Quincy Jones. At 87 years old, he makes another hit record with the song. Oh, God bless him.
All right, well, we're out of time on this one, but we can do this again. You know, I mean, this is a series also, and it's also streaming. So, it's been fun hanging out with you.
It's been a lot of fun, Joey. Thank you.
I have your script, and I'm going to go out and make the movie and not give you any credit for it.
But no, we're going to make this movie, though. I know. We are making this movie.
It's going to happen, and it's At the Hop, and it's John Madara, Philly Sound, if you want to go look him up. Right, John?
Absolutely. That Philly Sound, or just me directly, John Madara. But all I could say, then we'll leave the audience with this, is that At the Hop will be a movie that when it's over, you'll be dancing, you'll have a smile on your face, and you're going to feel good in your heart. Because it was the best time in American history in the 50s. The best time in American history. It's so different from where we are today in American history.
Well, let a smile be your umbrella, but don't get a mouthful of rain.